Hey everyone, and welcome back to a Little Witchery's 4th devlog. In this episode, we'll be going over some new enemies I've added, how I've reworked some old enemies, and made the whole combat scenarios feel a little bit better with the mechanics that I have, as well as combining them with the platforming mechanics within the game as well. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So to start off with things that I've added new, we have a new mermaid enemy that I think is just really cool. You'll notice that she doesn't have any hair yet. I was having issues with the weight painting and Blender with the hair not working correctly, so I decided just to cut that out for now and get the model that's working as it is, so I can go ahead and start building out the mechanics and iterating on how she actually functions and plays. So what this enemy does is she'll start above water, dive into it, and then find a random location within a ring outside of the player. If the location is valid, so she's on water, which in this case is just, the ground, and within the right distance, she'll pop up. After a short delay, she'll blow some bubbles at the player, and then she'll dive back down, choose a new location, and then dive up again. I love this enemy because it's not just a can you attack it, but it asks the player to maneuver a little bit, to platform a little bit. I went through 2 iterations of the bubbles, where the first one was that she would track the player while blowing the bubbles. That didn't feel like it gave the player enough time to actually maneuver around, because the idea is that you can just dash and somehow get around her, and then once you've dodged her attack, you can counterattack. While she was tracking, it made that whole situation a little bit more difficult, and it made it feel like you had to almost weave your bullet, your spirit ball, in between all her projectiles coming at you in order to score a hit. Some iterations I'm planning to do with this enemy later on is that when she dives down and chooses a new location, you can actually see her silhouette darkened underneath the water and track her as she moves around. So it's not just popping up in some random location. You actually have a bit of a forewarning as to where she's going to appear. I've changed how the casting mechanic works. So instead of being a UI element that appears on your screen, the camera actually zooms in over Cassie's shoulder, and you can see her hand invoking the different elements as you do. I've made this change because I really want it to feel like the player is casting a spell themselves. They're not choosing something from a radio menu, but constructing an actual spell. And I think this went a long way in achieving that sort of integration between the player and the game themselves. However, I was already kind of running into issues with platforming as to not really knowing where you're going to land. You're kind of guessing about where you'll be going or what you'll be moving to when you're in this kind of first person perspective, which can make more precise platforming a lot more difficult. And so I think I'm going to iterate through this again to somehow have both a camera that's far away so you can see where Cassie is moving and where she's jumping to, but also have that really visceral feel that you are casting these spells yourself. Along with that, I want you to be able to cast these spells on a moment's notice, especially when you're newer at the game. It's going to be hard to remember exactly, okay, is it water, air, is it earth, water? And then also hitting the gestures correctly and getting it to recenter. And so when you're jumping in the air, it actually slows down time for a little bit, giving you an opportunity to cast your spell mostly uninhibited, and more time to think and process what's going on. I also added in a hover to help with the aforementioned troubles with platforming. So you can hover above the air above the ground for a second or so before it drops you back. And then you can actually jump again and do your double jump to hover a second time if in the air if you so wish, if you want to keep up that air time. This is kind of inspired by Control's hovering flying mechanic, which I thought was just so much fun. Like, it just makes you feel so powerful being able to fly over the enemies that are all just chilling on the ground, wishing they could damage you. It really made you feel magical, and that's something I wanted to work into this game. And having, poor platforming controls felt like the golden opportunity. So I think this will be something I'll keep as well. Now, to go back to the enemies that were already in the game, we have the Ghost, which has been given an awesome new model. So the Ghost he only has 1 HP. Any attack will take them out. So they're really designed to attack the player within group and to mob the player. So 2 good ideas that I have that I think I'll be going forward with this is I was inspired to make this guy a jellyfish. And so when he gets close to you, he like reaches out with his little tentacly arms and shocks you, dealing a little bit of damage. I also have considered that perhaps these enemies, or a version of them, are invulnerable, and so it's actually not about attacking them at all, but essentially using your push to corral them into a certain area where they can't get out and they're no longer a threat, or perhaps an area that then once they're inside of it, they hit some sort of material or environmental hazard that destroys them that way. Another ram, an enemy, while it doesn't have a model yet, is that really working at full functionality as I originally conceived. So it's invulnerable to any sort of attacks during its normal behaviors. But if the player is able to throw up a wall and block the enemy during its ramming phase, it'll actually get stunned for a little bit, dropping its shield of invulnerability and being open to a few times of attack. This also works if you're standing in front of a wall close behind you and you dodge it and it rushes into the wall. The reason I haven't modeled this yet is I really don't know exactly what creature it could be. I've thought about making it a horse, since all of these enemies, this is going to be for mostly testing, but when I get into actually designing dungeons, the first dungeon is the water dungeon, and so these enemies all need to be aquatic themed. And I thought about making it, 2 things are on my mind, either a horse based on, the old mythologies that horses were born of the ocean, so they're somehow, in some weird way, they're attached to water. The second is to make it like a flying dolphin or a porpoise or something like that, so lean more into the spiritual side of things and just make it like a flying dolphin. So I'm kind of bouncing between those ideas, haven't decided yet. If you have an idea for what this ram enemy to be, let me know in the comments, and I'd love to get some extra ideas to play with. The third thing is this little eyeball guy who I've restructured to not only go horizontally but to move vertically as well, and also made him a little bit more modular as far as being able to give him a very specific angle of rotation and speed. And so this enemy actually can't be destroyed typically, and really more acts as an extra environmental hazard to the combat situation. So not only are you having to fight the mermaid or control the ghosts with the mob, but also having to jump up and dodge the beam whenever it circles back around at you, adding in a little bit of platforming challenge to the equation of having to take out these enemies. And I really am happy with what this eyeball enemy adds with his little laser, because it can make everything a lot more tense, knowing that not having to split your focus between this enemy, but keeping in the back of your mind that in another second or 2, that laser is going to come back around and you're going to need to be ready to jump for it. I should hopefully have out a demo of the combat and a little bit of the platforming within the next week or so. So please stay tuned. I'd love to get your feedback, see how you enjoy playing the game, get your ideas about what I could change, what I could adapt, and what I could iterate on through this development process. So, thanks everyone for watching, and that's it for this week. Catch you next one.